Hi Year 11, so you have got your English Literature Paper 2 exam on Tuesday in the morning. So this one is longer than your Paper 1 that you did before because there are 3 different sections to it. So the first section is section A, and that is on an inspector calls. So there will be lots of other texts that are listed, but you have been studying an inspector calls, so you need to make sure that you answer the questions on that one, the question on that one. So you will be given a choice of 2 questions, but you only answer one of them. So you answer one question. Put that in capital letters and underline it twice because it's so important, because despite having said this year after year, someone will be the person that answers more than one. Don't be that person. You only answer one question. They will only mark one answer, so it's an absolute waste of your time to do any more than that. Generally speaking, they will give you a kind of character focused question or a theme focused question. Sometimes what they might do is they might connect a theme to a character. It could well be that there's 2 character questions, there could be 2 theme questions. It's not definite that it will be one of these, a character or theme, okay? My advice to you is to go for, if you get the option to, go for the theme question if possible, because it means that you can actually talk about a wider variety of characters, whereas the character question, you're more likely to just focus on one. Okay, so my advice to you is, if possible, do the theme question. Section B. That is power and conflict poetry. So in this one, you get a named poem. So that is the one that you have to talk about. You cannot not talk about it. And then you get a choice of which poem you want to compare it to. Okay, now it doesn't matter if you talk about them for different lengths of time. Say, for example, if you write more about the named poem than the chosen poem, but you want to make sure it's as balanced as possible. The most important thing to remember is that you do talk about the named poem and the chosen poem for at least 1 paragraph each. Now, a bit of a reminder for you here, and kind of a bit of advice really, that remember, when it is saying conflict, conflict doesn't have to be war, although war is a part of conflict, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be about war. Conflict comes in many different forms. So you might have that kind of inner or like mental sort of conflict. There might be emotional conflict. There might be verbal conflict, as well as that physical conflict. There might as well be things like conflict between nature and humans. There might be conflict between the powerful and the powerless, or classes, or gender. They're all different ways that conflict can be seen throughout different poems in the cluster. So you've got to make sure that you are making the question work for you. And for that, you're going to rely, for your kind of comparison poem, you have got those Super 6 poems. Now, these Super 6, I'm not saying that these are going to be ones that appear on the exam, but I'm saying these 6 poems are ones that no matter what the named poem is, you are going to be able to compare to them. So, Ozymandias is one, and Exposure, and they are generally connected to ideas of nature, although some elements of the power of people as well. You've then also got London and Checking Out My History. Which looks at power of people. There's kind of power of class, power of identity, connected to people. And then you've got remains and the charge of the Light Brigade. And that is more specifically kind of connected to conflict in relation to war. Okay. Then we've got section C. This is the unseen poetry. And something I should have said, sorry, is that you want to be spending roughly 45 minutes on each section. Now, something that happened in the Literature Paper 1 exam is we all got quite excited about the question for Macbeth, and a lot of students came up to me and said how they spent too long on Macbeth and they didn't spend enough time, or they didn't have lots of time on A Christmas Carol, so they didn't write as much. We have got to be stricter in terms of, and more disciplined in terms of the time that we're spending on each section. So we've got to keep an eye on that time. So you've got to be thinking to yourself, right, 45 minutes on In Spectacles, 45 minutes in Power and Conflict Poetry, 45 minutes on Unseen Poetry. Don't just assume, because it's got this word unseen in it, that you're not going to be able to access it. It'll be the hardest bit. That's not the case at all. Often students kind of do best on this one because they've got the freedom to explore these poems that they've not had anyone else's input on, which is a great opportunity for you to be able to demonstrate exactly what it is that you can do in terms of your analysis of literature and writers' ideas and methods. So there are 2 questions in the unseen section. The first question is worth 24 marks. And for this question, you are assessed for AO1, which is your kind of writer's ideas. It's your use of references, so your quotes, it's your understanding of the text, and it's your answering the question. And then you also have AO2. Now, what I've found is the kind of best thing that you can do if you're, as a kind of way to kind of chunk your approach to analysing the poem that you're given, is you've got to make sure, first of all, you read the questions, and read both questions, because the questions tell you what the poem is about. You can't get any easier than that when the question actually tells you what the poem is about. So it could be about relationships, it might be about moving home, it might be about leaving school. The questions tell you that already. So read that so you've got an awareness before you start reading the poem completely. In terms of your analysis and methods, the first thing you should be looking at is, how does the poem begin? And then how does the poem end? And what is kind of suggested through that? And you want to be connecting those ideas there to tone and kind of shifts in those tones as well. Once you've looked at that, then you can start to look at things like, right, okay, well, is there a kind of a contrast between those things? Are there any motifs that support the idea of the tone that you've identified? Is there anything symbolised? And your kind of, as I've said before, your bread and butter, the thing that you can always rely on, you know for a fact is going to be in there, is your words and phrases. An examiner cannot ignore your analysis of words and phrases. It is obvious it's a method there. But if we can, I think one of the best things that we can be doing is looking at how does the poem begin, how does it end, because then we're also looking at structure, and the examiners really love to see you talking about structure. Okay, then the second question on the unseen, this is that 8 marker. And for this one, you are only assessed on AO2 analysis of methods. Now, what the exam board have said that they like is this following structure. So, both poets do what? Both poets do what in relation to the methods. However, they also do this. So essentially, they're looking for similarities and then a difference. Okay, and as I said, you're getting your marks for your analysis of your methods. So your tone, your symbolism, your motif, your contrast, all of those things come under analysis of methods. Now, another little reminder for you is that the examiner gets sent your script, so your response, and they mark it on a computer. If you leave a large gap between your responses, which means the examiner would have to kind of click the button a couple of times to keep turning over the page, they might miss your response. They might think, oh, they've not answered that question, and you'll get a 0 for it. There is no benefit to you leaving pages between your answers of the questions. There are clearly signposted space in the margin for you to write down the question that you are answering. So please make sure you put that in there and make it really clear that you're answering the next question. Okay, it's about making their lives easier so that they can concentrate on giving you more marks rather than trying to find your answer in the first place. Okay, so that's an overview of the entire paper. I'm then going to now go through the kind of structure to each of your responses, although I've done it kind of for your unseen there. But with your section A, so with an inspector calls then, really similar, and this is why I'm not going through the AOs that I broke down for you with the paper 1, because you can watch that video back if you need reminding. But because essentially every one of your paragraphs for an inspector calls needs to include the exact same as what you had to include for Macbeth and A Christmas Carol as well, in terms of AO1, AO2 and AO3 in every single paragraph. So inspector calls, you're going to have an introduction. Your next paragraph, so this one here, is going to be based on an aspect or a scene or a conversation that takes place before the inspector arrives. Now, on the English Revision Hub and in some of my English lessons and additional English lessons, I've gone through the key scenes that I've put on there for inspector calls. They are on the English Revision Hub. Go and read through them, pick out key quotations and remind yourselves of those as well. Then you're going to go with during the inspector's questioning. Another paragraph during the inspector's questioning. So that might be kind of at different points of how a character responds to the inspector. It might be in this paragraph you focus on how Mr. Burling responds in comparison to how Sheila responds. And then finally you're going to do after the inspector leaves. Okay, if you can get on to a conclusion, great, to kind of summarise your opinion in relation to the question, but if you can't, don't worry. The most important thing is that you are doing AO1, so that's your writer's ideas, quotes, understanding the text, answering the question. Your AO2 analysis of methods, and your AO3 is themes only if we're looking at grades 4 to 5, and writer's intentions, so perhaps Priestley was attempting to so that he could, is your grade 6 plus there. Okay, for your analysis of methods, okay, the examiner is going to like to see you talking about contrast, so that's differences. We've got parallels, that's similarities, motif, symbolism, and then obviously you've got your words and phrases as well that you can rely on. Okay, those of you that are looking for your grade 6 plus also need to be, when you look at a moment in the play, so a key scene in the play, how does that connect to another point in the text? So what are the connections? Is there foreshadowing? Is there something that's come before it that then connects to it as well? So they're looking for those connections across the text. So use the key scenes to help you to do that. For your poetry structure, your power and conflict poetry, sorry. Again, you want your brief kind of introduction, and you've got your core knowledge to rely on that for that. Then you're going to do named poem, chosen poem, named poem, chosen poem. And the reason for that is because if needs be, thinking about your timing, you can just leave. You don't have to do that one if you're running out of time. Move on to the unseen. Okay? So if you've got time, get onto that. If you don't, move on to the unseen poetry. It's really important that we don't miss that. Now for your grades 4 to 5, just do comparison in the introduction. Don't worry about doing comparison elsewhere. In fact, to be honest, you could probably get away with that for grade 6 as well. Grade 7+, in order to be more perceptive and critical, you're probably going to use elements of comparison in order to support your writer's intention. So it's going to kind of help you to be more perceptive, I would say, with that. Now, with the unseen poetry, so question 1 on unseen poetry, you will again just do a brief kind of introduction about what the poem is about. Remember, they tell you that in the question. And then you're aiming for 2 to 3 paragraphs following the structure of AO1 and AO2. So what ideas are presented, and then how are they presented, as in basically what methods are used. And then, as I said before, your unseen poetry question number 2, you're going to be looking at both poets do this, both of them do this, however. And again, so you've got a difference there. If you were going to miss any out, miss out that second both one. Okay? So that is an overview of the exam with some key tips for ensuring that you are answering every question, that you're answering the right questions, and that you're identifying really specific methods that are going to be key drivers to progress you up through the levels. Just remember to make sure that you explain them as well. Don't just zoom in on a word and then not do anything with it. It's a waste of your time. Making sure that when you're identifying a method, whether that's contrast, motif, symbolism, a word, you're explaining what does it suggest, what image does it create. Okay, that's really important, because that is what is going to propel you up the levels.